Welcome to the Virtual Strategic Solutions Virtual Reality Simulation System. Accessing Legacy Dataset. Files loaded. Simulation ready. The diehards were unique among most raider gangs in that they were averse to killing innocents, believing there were other ways of getting what they wanted. This led to the other raiders labeling them as weak and pacifists. However, many survivors refused to hand their supplies over to the gang, leading them to kill innocents. This caused the gang's leader, Margie McClintock, to go into a depressive state, deciding to take her own life in a chem overdose and hoping another member of the gang, Vincent Freed, would be a more successful leader. At some point prior to 2102, the diehards were wiped out, with super mutants taking over much of their former territory. A number of diehards left Appalachia before the Scorched could finish them off. These survivors traveled along the northeastern states, reaching places like the Commonwealth or Washington, D.C. By 2103, however, the surviving diehards returned to Appalachia under the leadership of one of its original members, Meg Groberg. They had heard about the hidden treasure in Appalachia from Rose's broadcasts and decided to come back. Along the way, they found other Wastelanders who joined them, leading into the creation of a new raider group. The diehards and the other bands settled in the Toxic Valley, turning the crashed space station into a fortified base known as the Crater. The diehards are seen by other gang members as old raiders, but otherwise are well known. Built upon the wreckage of the Valiant 1 space station, the Crater is the largest raider settlement in Appalachia. It was constructed by Caleb Fisher and his crew, who, like many others, joined up with the surviving diehards as they made their way back to the region. Crater maintains several crop fields, which supply the raiders with a steady food reserve. The space station appears to have fallen from orbit at a high velocity, devastating the surrounding area. The bulk of the station remains embedded upright in the center of the crater, with fragments scattered around it. By 2103, the location has been turned into a raider settlement, adding scaffolding, amenities, and other decorations typical of raider architecture. The crater core is located in the center of the spaceship and has been turned into the raiders' headquarters. Most of the raider team for the Vault 79 raid can be found here with the leader of the raiders. Meg's mother died by suicide in the aftermath of the Great War, which gave her the determination to keep surviving in a depressing world. Meg was never a proud American, feeling the country was not worth fighting for, and she was happy when the establishment was destroyed by the war. Meg met Johnny Weston, a man who had infiltrated her gang by blending in with the other raiders. When Meg found out that he had simply slipped into the gang, she reacted positively, and the two shared drinks. They eventually shacked up and continue a physical relationship with each other. After the Brotherhood of Steel returns to Appalachia, by way of the Brotherhood 1st Expeditionary Force, Meg assigns Burke, Pierce, and Sheena to fight and/or sabotage the returning Brotherhood as part of the war party. As Meg and the other raiders have previous experience dealing with the Brotherhood before they left Appalachia, she believes that they are dangerous, and the only interaction she desires to have with them is putting bullets in them. Meg views the raider lifestyle as necessary in order to get by in their world, feeling it justifies a lot of their actions and that they are still on the right path. While she was a member of the diehards, Meg believed that Margie McClintock's ideal of the pacifist raider life was unrealistic and often disobeyed the diehards' standing order to not fire unless fired upon. Even though Rose and Meg have a mutual dislike for each other, with Meg calling Rose a bitch, Rose supports Meg's raider lifestyle, asking, "You don't think Meg and her crew are alive today because they were fair, do you? You got to live a little, be daring, screw someone over and never look back." Despite this, she is shown to be merciful at times, such as sparing Barb's life if she is revealed as the mole. Meg is shown to have a non-confrontational side, as she chooses not to directly confront Barb, instead dropping hints so Barb can correct her course, showing that Meg still retains faith in others. A similar instance occurs when Meg hears Foundation are considering breaking into the vault. Meg gives a veiled threat to the vault dweller, warning, "All I'm saying is, be a real shame if someone I know were thinking the grass was greener over there. They might want to think a little harder." As a leader, she hates discrimination and sees value in diversity. She values people like the super mutant Gale and the ghoul Lucky Lou, the former for her strength and devotion for protecting Rara, and the latter for his skills in explosives. She once said, "Recruitment is better. Kill only for food and supplies." Nash claims Meg tried to be part of the brutal cutthroats, but did not prove herself to them, resulting in her starting her own gang. Another instance of Meg's empathy is upon finding out Rara stole her snack cakes. Meg took pity and allowed her to eat the rest. Meg's leadership is controversial and viewed as poor among some raiders for various reasons, particularly to Lev, Serge, Caleb Fisher, and Hal Gleason. A common complaint is that they feel Meg does not go far enough as a raider. For example, Lev viewed her as weak, mentioning she would never strike Foundation. Johnny's Terminal claims Meg was planning a lot of raids on them, although it is not clarified if these plans were delayed or dropped. Meg highly values her connections to the loyal members of her group. She can be quite trusting and unaware of the dangers of certain people, which is shown to have consequences. For example, Rara played outside Crater with only Gale to watch over her, which nearly killed Rara due to the lack of better supervision. Johnny attempts to secretly murder the Vault Dweller when Meg is not present. One of the newest recruits in the Raider group, Kiyomi was assigned to guard duty on the outskirts of the crater, near the farming fields. She is bored and frustrated by this duty. Because no one would dare assault the crater, Kiyomi never sees anything interesting, rather wanting to plan a raid or act against Foundation. She theorizes that Meg Groberg placed her on guard duty as a test of her wills, a test she then becomes determined to pass. However, Ren writes that, as Kiyomi has the southern end of the area on lockdown, surprise attacks are not to worry about. Roxy is responsible for finding and identifying deserters from the gang and making sure that they do not come back, usually by sending hunters after them. Once a day, Roxy will ask the Vault Dweller to track a deserter and make sure that they get the message that deserting is not an option, either by killing them or making sure that they will leave Appalachia permanently. However, she is lenient if the deserter is convinced to return to the Raiders, giving them another chance. After their parents died, Creed and his younger sister Barb survived together in the Wasteland, keeping each other alive. Eventually, both of them joined the Raiders sometime before their return to Appalachia. Creed is well known in the crater as both a coward and a pushover. He once stole chems from Aerie, but admitted to being the thief after being asked only 3 times. He also stole some tools from Caleb Fisher to fix up a power armor suit he found, but gave them back after being grilled, with Fisher also confiscating the power armor. Creed views his sister affectionately, despite her tendency to snitch on him, although she has a poor opinion of her older brother. He dislikes Lev after he made several passes towards his sister. He looks down on the cult of the Mothman and the idea of the Mothman being a god, saying if there is a god, it is the Mega Sloth. He says he would not mind starting a cult of the Mega Sloth. Munch lives in a yellow bungalow in the northern part of the crater. He describes himself as the resident historian, though he freely admits he bends the truth about history. Some of his writings on topics such as the Great War, Wales, and the space station he resides in can be found in his tent. He claims aliens are real and are what brought down the space station in the first place and are probably working to dominate the planet. Ren was born several years after the Great War, so the post-apocalyptic world is all she has ever known. Ren's father was a member of the Diehards, and Ren was born and raised as part of the gang. Facing the growing threat of the Scorched Plague, Ren and her father were among those who abandoned Margie McClintock and fled Appalachia under Meg Groberg's lead. With both viewing the region as a death trap, they were only too willing to leave. Her father ultimately died sometime before 2103, outside of Appalachia. When Meg and the Raiders chose to return to the region in 2103, Ren greatly disagreed, but was eventually convinced by Meg, though she is still somewhat resentful of the choice. After setting up at the crater, Ren became the Raiders' communications expert, also coordinating scouting efforts and analyzing threats in the surrounding region for security purposes. The amount of work she undertakes and the lack of help she receives has left her greatly annoyed by the other raiders' seeming incompetence, and she even marvels at how their gang has managed to survive. Because of her young age of 18, and because she is not capable of much heavy lifting, Wren is often pushed around by the other raiders. As a result, she has developed a hostile attitude towards those around her, even warning the vault dwellers of Vault 76 that if they cross her, she will slit their throat faster than they can cry for mommy. The white powder covering the toxic valley tends to break the crater comms electronics, and from time to time Wren needs to replace the radio vacuum tubes, asking for the dwellers for help. She is curious about the technology Rose has at her place at the top of the world, and is pondering to ask permission from Meg to visit it. She is also not keen on people taking chems. According to Creed, Wren used to own a dog, however. It would not stop barking. Barb killed the dog and she got away with it because Wren believed her alibi. Per his own word, Johnny was born before the Great War in a military family and grew up near US Army bases all around the nation because of his father's military service. Although his family did not approve, Johnny pursued his dreams of becoming an actor in New York City. This caused a rift between him and his parents, stating that either they disowned him or he disowned them, depending on who you believe. However, his career was ultimately a failure, describing himself as a bum living on the streets of New York City when the bombs dropped in 2077. It is uncertain how much of his background is truth and how much is fabrication, though his claim of breaking into the Federal Reserve Bank of New York seems plausible, as his biometrics exist in surviving government database backups, tied to a felony conviction which he claims to have suffered only because his crew bailed on him. During his time as a freelance raider, he was close friends with Hal Gleason both before and after the war. They did jobs together, and Hal turned out to be the most solid partner Johnny had. Working together transformed into a lasting relationship and mutual feelings. Eventually, Johnny became involved with Meg Groberg's raiders, infiltrating the gang and blending in. When Meg finally realized what he did, rather than stringing him up, she invited him for drinks, and eventually the two shacked up. Johnny's relationship with Hal deteriorated over Meg, as Hal seemed jealous. When Meg's group finally returned to Appalachia and settled at the crater, Johnny joined them. His unique skill set benefited the raiders handsomely, as Johnny is an expert at infiltration and confidence games, giving raiders a lot of soft power. The arrangement is a mutually beneficial exchange, rather than any sort of formal subordination. Settling at the crater came at a cost, as Hal refused to put down roots and separated from Johnny, going his own way. Johnny realized too late that Hal didn't just leave him, he betrayed him, taking a far greater cut of their last job together than he said, taking it with him, and disappeared into the Wastelands. Weston hated the fact that his best friend betrayed him like that, and vowed vengeance, no matter how much pain it would cause him. He got his chance when he was scoping out the Watoga Civic Center and the raiders occupying it for Meg. While the raiders were rejected out of hand as candidates for the crater crew, as Meg abhors slavery, Weston spotted Hal tending to the spectators in the luxury boxes. Spotting his opportunity, he began to plan how to get inside to free Hal so that he can kill Gleason for betraying him. Johnny rationalizes it as a small mercy that would ultimately save Hal from a fate worse than death, namely a lifetime of slavery, and prefers to bury his feelings for him, as killing Hal will evidently be the most difficult act in Johnny's life thus far. Until that happens, he operates out of his quarters in the core, standing out from the other raiders thanks to his spotless black suit. Given that keeping them clean is extremely difficult, it's a feat that he manages it. When not in the field, he passes time by playing cards with other raiders and is no stranger to cheating at them. Once knowledge of Vault 79 reaches Meg, he begins to prepare for the raid, in case there are any survivors in the vault who might need to be manipulated, twisted, cajoled, or otherwise convinced to give the raiders what they want. Johnny believes that the world will eventually get back on track, and gold will once more become backing for currencies, and as such, controlling the US national reserves would put Crater on track to dominating trade. Rara was found by Gale, who acts as a surrogate mother to her. Since then, they have protected and taken care of each other. She is the only child living in the crater, and is disappointed that she has no other children to play with. She also does not know her actual name and claims to be an only child. Ra-Ra owns a stuffed rabbit toy called Bunabun that she is very fond of. When encountered, she can be seen creating colourful chalk drawings on the floor. Recently, Ra-Ra and Gale were playing I Spy by the Grafton Lake. Gale mentioned seeing something ugly, brown, and coming right at them. The animal took Bunabun, so Ra-Ra chased it into a pipe. She encountered robots and hid from them. Caleb Fisher was born and raised among the Amish. After the Great War, he began to lose his faith and no longer believed in the God he was raised to worship, as many church leaders saw their survival as vindication of their beliefs. Not wanting to be associated with such a mindset, Fisher used his Rumspringa, an Amish coming-of-age process, to leave the church. He put his faith in hard work and other human beings who could prove themselves instead. After leaving, Fisher joined with Lev's gang before he met Meg's raiders, and his time with them convinced him that his faith was detrimental to his survival. He likes Lev's ruthless style of leadership more than Meg, believing that her heart is a risk. However, he knows that Lev would not hesitate to get rid of Lou, so he often sides with Meg to keep Lev in line and preserve his friendship with Lou. Fisher's and Lou's friendship is so close that Lou wishes Fisher to have his belongings after his death. Despite his upbringing, he is highly skilled with technology. He is responsible for the thankless job of setting up and maintaining much of the crater's infrastructure, but often complains due to the constant amount of work shoved on him by the other raiders. He was the one who created Weasel's vocal collar, adapted from the research of Eddie Harrison, which he found in Monongah. He also refurbished an old suit of Brotherhood of Steel power armor into Raider power armor. Lev is a former mobster that came to America from Russia before the Great War. He enjoyed the change in locale and likes the United States, or what is left of it, as Americans are, in his view, soft and make for easy prey. Becoming a raider came easy for him, and Lev eventually threw his lot in with Meg Groberg and the Crater Raiders. In fact, he considers himself to be Meg's second-in-command and behaves in an arrogant, lofty manner towards other raiders. While Lev was fighting super mutants with his fists, he crossed paths with Surge and offered her a place in their group. In reality, Meg has come into conflict with Lev frequently. When Lev started making unwanted passes at Barb, her brother told Meg. Meg then threatened Lev's manhood with a shotgun in order to make him stop. Surge was trained to shoot from a young age as soon as she could hold a pistol straight by her father, and became an expert marksman with surgical precision, earning her nickname. Her father was no pushover either, once killing 3 Yao Guai with only a pistol. However, even that could not prevent his death from heart failure. After he died, Surge wandered the Appalachian Trail and met Lev as he fought super mutants, joining him and ending up at the crater. Like Lev, she dislikes Meg Groberg's open arms policy of allowing all sorts of mutants to join the Raiders, believing that it will end up getting them killed one day. She derogatorily views Lucky Lou as a walking corpse, and Gale a green-skinned monster, and thinks both of them are unnatural freaks. According to Meg, Surge never respected her as a leader. She also dislikes Johnny Weston and his propensity for cheating at cards. However, she is fond of Molly and her drinks. Gale left her home sometime long before 2103, and in the following years found herself alone with nobody to take care of her. During this time, she found Ra-Ra, who had been abandoned by her own companions, and they quickly bonded because of their solitude. Since then, they have protected and watched out for each other, with Gale becoming a surrogate mother to Ra-Ra. Gale and Ra-Ra came to Appalachia in 2103, and she was introduced to Meg Groberg by Ra-Ra, who had found Meg and brought her to help them out when Gale had needed aid. Impressed by Meg's acceptance of her being a super mutant, and by Meg's additional assistance in caring for Ra-Ra, they chose to join the Raiders at the crater. However, her relationship with the other Raiders, such as Lev and Surge, is shakier, especially because they find her unnatural and freakish. Gale feels frustrated by the fact that the rest of the Raiders make up excuses to not help her when she needs it, claiming her temperament is too poor to offer assistance. She insists that if she is angry, it is precisely due to the lack of help. She also has a disparaging opinion of other super mutants, but believes that they would benefit from the same type of friendship she has found with Ra-Ra. Lou was born around 2007. Before the Great War, Lou was an engineer who lived in Pittsburgh. He was 70 years old when the bombs dropped, making him nearly 100 years old in present time. Rumors around the crater say that an atomic bomb fell straight into his living room, but it was a dud and failed to go off. This was the origin of his nickname, Lucky Lou, a reference to his ability to turn a curse into a blessing, and he went on to defy death in at least a dozen more incidents. As the radiation poured into Pittsburgh, Lou became a ghoul, something that has haunted him ever since. After Lou joined up with the Raiders, he became respected by people like Meg Groberg, Caleb Fisher, and Weasel, even if some of his friends were disgusted by his appearance. Lou was one of the few people to play with Ra-Ra when no one else would, and she views him as a friend. He lived in a small room resembling a bunker in the underground area of the crater core. Although many of the crater raiders would take a bullet for Lou, his worries of turning feral spiraled him into deep depression. These feelings were planted and amplified by Lev, who despised ghouls and wanted Lou in particular out of the way to sabotage the raiders' heist plans. Not wanting to take any chances, Lou would rather take his own life over possibly going feral and attacking his friends. He left behind a goodbye note, entrusting his belongings to Fisher, showing the depths of their friendship, and went to hole up in Carlton Mine in order to find a decent way to kill himself. Unable to simply pull the trigger, Lou constructed a number of death traps that would result in his demise, including a machine-powered shotgun blast, several automated turrets scavenged from the Atlas Observatory, and even a makeshift building that would collapse in on itself. However, none of these contraptions worked, despite multiple trials, living up to Lou's status as someone who would always cheat death. Left with few options, Lou decided to take the last resort of simply detonating explosives. If the collapse of the mine would not kill him, then at least he would be trapped inside and unable to hurt anybody. Before becoming a raider, Pierce states that he was studying hard in school for a future that never came to be. Pierce was once held prisoner by the employer of Burke. Although Burke acted as a guard, Pierce treated them with respect. Sheena arrived, and the three decided to escape together. Pierce is one of the three raiders that inhabit the crater war room, along with Burke and Sheena, that Meg Groberg assigned to fight the Brotherhood. Pierce was the one to start the war party, considering it a family, with his part being to talk and inform others about why they do what they do and how important their efforts are. Although Meg was initially unsure if she should trust him with the responsibility of that fight, she realized that Pierce had a silver tongue and could easily recruit people to rally behind the cause of fighting the Brotherhood. Although the war party is small, Pierce assures that the party has support from dedicated craterites as well as mercenaries.